What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Glory UGA podcast brought to you by our great friends at My Bookie. And today on the show, we're going to do what we like to do here on the Glory UGA podcast and talk some Georgia football. Usually, I like to talk on the field, hardcore nuts and bolts football. But unfortunately, even though we are in the middle of Georgia spring practice, there's not a ton of on the field stuff to talk about that we haven't already touched on earlier this week. But what we do have today are some what I think are eye-opening comments from both Kirby Smart and a number of Georgia football players coming out of yesterday's press conference and interviews. So let's go ahead and dive into this, guys, because I think these comments were very revealing about last year's team and also what we can expect from this year's Georgia football team. So I'm going to open with Kirby Smart's press conference. Now, I'm not going to read you everything the man said. There are a lot of things I want to throw out here at you guys, but me sitting here reading what Kirby said, that's not great video podcasting, right? So I'm going to just sit here and just read you one specific quote, all right? So stay with me, all right? So Coach Smart was asked specifically about this group of players and how coachable they are, and his response I thought was very revealing. He said, quote, "No, we have to coach you. That's what they pay us to do, to coach them. They have to be willing to receive coaching. And on the whole, my whole preach after practice was we've got a lot of guys that put their hands up. They're offended when you coach them." I'm not talking about the freshmen. I'm talking about in general. So we had multiple NFL coaches come through here, go to practice, and they talk about how their players love to be coached. They love to be given a nugget, a technique that might help them play longer or play better. And some of our guys were offended by it. It's like, you're coaching me hard? Like, you're telling me I got to play with effort? And some of them, I guess, have never been held to that standard. But that standard is not going to change here, end quote. All right? So I want to juxtapose that with another quote from Kirby Smart. I'm going to go back a couple years. This is right after the 2022 National Championship game. So this is from the 2021 season, Georgia's first national championship under Kirby Smart. You guys probably remember this quote, right? So he was doing an interview with Reese Davis, and at the time, we were eating it up, right? And he's talking about entitlement seeping into your program. So this is the quote from a couple years back. "I don't know that our team, our roster that's coming back is prepared for what they're about to see because there's a sense of entitlement. There's a sense of the disease that has always crept in at Georgia. There's a huge anointment and entitlement that can affect your program. So now it turns for us to turn their attention of what we've got to do to keep it going." All right, that's all I'm going to read to you from Kirby Smart. I don't want to go any further. I know it's annoying to hear me sit there and just read that all day. But I think those two quotes juxtaposed together are very revealing about last year and also, again, heading into this season. So let's talk about entitlement, right? Kirby has been acutely aware of the danger that this sense of entitlement can pose to his program in us accomplishing what he wants us to accomplish as a football program. And even though he has been working as hard as he can, he's seen it, he saw it coming, he's been taking steps to try to prevent it, but steps or not, it's pretty clear that last year in 2024, we let that disease of entitlement infect us more than we ever have under Kirby Smart. And that's not to say Kirby's not doing a great job trying to get these guys to buy in. It's a natural consequence of the type of success that our program experienced from 2021 to 2023. And I always felt like, of course we had the talent. To win a national title, you have to have elite talent, obviously. But there are a lot of teams that have high-level talent. And I felt, especially in 21 and 22, and to a little bit, maybe a lesser degree in 2023, because we didn't win the national title that year, I felt like our culture was a separating factor for us. The drive, the hunger that was pushing this program to achieve something we had not achieved in 40 plus years, right? But after you achieve that success one year and you followed up back to back and everyone's patting you on the back and telling you how great you are and you've gotten to the top of the college football landscape, and you come into every season now where everybody's saying, well, now Georgia's the team to beat. Georgia's going to be the new dynasty. And when you hear that over and over and over again, when you're a young guy, it affects you. It affects you. You might not know it is in the moment. You have to say, no, I'm not going to let it affect me, but it is. It's seeping in. So that disease of entitlement, I do think it started to gradually erode some, not like a full cultural erosion within our program, but I do think there was an erosion of our culture to some degree with that sense of entitlement seeping in. And so I see Kirby Smart's comments, and we'll go to some of the players' comments here in a minute. I see these comments together as signs of a reckoning of sorts within the Georgia program after last season. I know we won the SEC championship game, right? We fought through adversity and we got that done, but we also bowed out very early in the college football playoff. We did not achieve the ultimate goal, which is, as Kirby was saying, that's our standard. Winning the SEC championship, that's great. Getting the college football playoff, that's great. But falling short of winning a national title, that's falling short of our standard. Our standard at Georgia now is winning national titles. So I see those comments from Kirby as him publicly laying down the gauntlet. Absolutely. Publicly doubling down on what our standard is at Georgia. And one thing you always have to understand with Kirby, guys, and I know a lot of you watch all his press conferences just like I do, and I've been doing this since the guy got the job back in 2016. It's been abundantly clear for a long time now that there's very little, if anything, that Kirby Smart says at a press conference, especially some of the more direct comments that might be perceived as critical of his team or players. There's very little this man says that's not 1,000% deliberate and intentional. He's sending messages to his team, to his players, through the media, through the press conferences. That's what the man's doing. He even said at practice, my preach after practice was that you guys aren't coachable. And so he was so frustrated, upset about it, that he comes and he delivers that message again. He doubles down on it at his press conference. So look, I can guarantee you guys, that Kirby Smart was fighting this sense of entitlement that was kind of seeping into our program all of last year. But the man can be aware of it all he wants. And he's been, again, acutely aware of it, clearly. He can fight it all he wants, but it doesn't really matter if the players aren't buying into it, right? If it's not resonating, not hitting the same way that it once did back in 2021 and 2022, right? And I think it's pretty clear that coming off the 2023 season, which I know we fell short of our ultimate goal, winning the national title there, but we're still killing teams. We have this incredible winning streak, the longest winning streak in SEC football history, right? In SEC games. So there's still like, you're hearing all this, right? You're hearing what Nick Saban would call the rat poison, and that starts to seep in. And so I think there was less buy-in from our program, from the players at large, not saying every guy, but in general with our program going into last season. And on top of that, like when you lose some big-time leaders who have kind of been the core of your program for a couple of years, that makes it even more difficult to avoid this sense of entitlement, to keep this disease from eroding your program. You lose guys like Brock Bowers, who might not have been the most vocal leader, but a lead by example guy, like just an absolute pillar in your program. 2021, 22, and 23. Ladd McConkey, same thing. Marcus Rosemy-Jackson, who might not have been like the most high-profile player, but that dude was just a stud, a leader on this team, did all the dirty work, and the players respected him. You got guys like Kendall Milton, Pop Dumas-Johnson, who might not have been as physically gifted as guys like C.J. Allen and Raylan Wilson and Jalen Walker. I think we can all agree on that. But in terms of leadership, that guy brought a ton to this program. There's a reason that Kirby Smart went and embraced him the way that he did after that Kentucky game and talked about him as glowingly as he did anytime that guy was brought up last season, certainly after the Kentucky game. You lose a guy like Kamari Laster, who'd been in the program for a long time, a culture guy, a leadership guy, Javon Bullard, very much so. All those guys that were holdovers from 2021 and 2022 and understood what it took to win national titles there, those guys move on, right? They either go to the NFL or in the case of Pop Dumas-Johnson, you transfer out. So we still had some good leaders. I'm not saying that we didn't have any good leaders last year. Jalen Walker did an incredible job. I remember seeing him at Texas walking up and down the sidelines. Georgia Tech game, same thing. Like, let's not give in. Let's not give up. All those things, man. Tate Ratledge did a good job. Like, we had some good leaders on this team, but what I would argue is that we did not have as many established veteran leaders, again, going back to that run from 2021 to 2023. What we had last year, in large part, you can't say it's true of everyone, but we had a lot of guys that I think you could say were in some way, shape, or form riding on the coattails of others' success, riding on the coattails of the success of guys like Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey and Kendall Milton and Javon Bullard and Kamari Laster, guys like that. And they were kind of just expecting it to happen, like to win at a high level because, hey, I'm at Georgia. That's what Georgia does. Like, that's who we are, right? And that's not exactly how it works. So I'll say this too. Don't take my word for it, okay? Now, am I maybe reading into this too much? Sure, possibly, of course. Maybe I am, right? Like when we don't have as much on the field stuff to talk about right now, maybe you're reading this stuff a little too much, but it certainly caught my eyes and my ears. But don't say my word for it, because here are some direct quotes from Georgia's football players, all right? From a couple of guys. I'm gonna just try to limit this to 2 players. Again, I don't want to read too much of this, but Oscar Delp, I thought this was, man, very eye-opening, alarming even. So Oscar Delp, in his interview yesterday, was quoted as saying, last year, there were times where I feel like I had 1 foot out the door. I was thinking about things I shouldn't have been thinking about, and it just kind of hurt me in ways that I didn't think it would happen. Then I kind of figured it out later in the year how I should practice and how I should be leading that room. Oh man, those are some strong words. Those are some strong words, man. And then Monroe Freeling in his interview echoes some similar-ish sentiments. He says, quote, I think that sometimes, some of the issues the offensive line had, I think that sometimes we were more worried about not failing than actually succeeding. And I think we thought we were more just senior heavy, so I think we thought we were there. I think we thought we were there. But I really think that we should have focused more on our fundamentals. All right, so when you read those quotes and you throw them in with Kirby Smart's quotes in his press conference, you could certainly view those comments as very alarming for the Georgia program. Like, oh my God, like the inmates are on the asylum. What is happening at Georgia? And at first, a part of me was like, dang, like, yeah, what is happening? And I kind of felt that way. But the more I thought about it, the more I read through those and listened to them, I started to reach a different conclusion. I see this as a good thing. And maybe I'm reaching here. It's possible. That's right. And I know I'm a Georgia guy, so you're probably thinking I'm just being a homer. Of course, Tyler, you're going to read this as glass half full. And maybe I'm guilty as charged. Maybe. But when I hear this, when I think about it, I see this as accountability, something that we didn't have enough of last year. We didn't have enough of that. Yeah, we still found a way to push through the adversity and win the SEC title, and that was awesome. That was great. But again, we didn't achieve the goal of winning a national title. And I do think a general lack of accountability within the program was part of why we didn't do that. And look, NIL, transfer portal, tough schedule, all of that, expanded playoffs. Did that play a role in it too? Of course it is. It's not just this one factor in isolation, but I do think this was one of those contributing factors that caused us to fall short of our ultimate goal. So I do see this as accountability. Again, I see this as a reckoning within our program on the part of both coaches and players. I hear a coach in Kirby Smart when he said those things that he said, and he said a lot more than just that. I just want to pull that one big quote there. I hear a coach, again, who is doubling down on what the standard is at Georgia, what the expectations are. A coach making it clear to all those veterans, because he specifically said it's not just the freshmen. He also went on later on in that same press conference to single out freshmen and say, look, these guys are working hard, man. Like, they're trying to figure out what we do, and they're not used to this, but they're out there working, man. Like, they're coachable. It seemed like he was, by and large, speaking to his veterans. So you have a coach who's making it clear to those guys who were here last year that maybe don't go back to 21 and 22, because most of those guys are now gone, making it clear to those guys, hey, we got some talented young dudes that we brought in who are sitting there working their butts off, ready to take your job. And trust me, if you don't get it together, if you don't start taking our coaching, then those guys are going to take your job. It's going to happen, man. You're going to have to go find somewhere else to be, right? So you have that. And then I hear players who have confronted their shortcomings. You hear Oscar Delp be very blunt, very direct. And on one hand, you want to be like, dude, Oscar, like, how did you let that happen? But I want to give the guy some props here. Like, we can't on one hand, like, always say we want these guys to be honest, not just give us like coach speak and player speak, right? We want them to be like direct and honest with us. And then when they are, like, kill them for us. I'm not going to kill Oscar Delp for that. I'm not going to kill him. I mean, again, it's a natural consequence of these things. That guy's been around for a while. He is one of those guys that's been around for a while, going to his 4th year in the program. So you have a guy like Oscar Delp who's reflecting and looking at himself in the mirror and saying, you know what? I didn't do a good enough job. I was part of the problem. It wasn't all on me, but I was part of the problem. I wasn't doing what I had to do. I had my mind somewhere else. I was being selfish. And he owned that. You have players who are owning these things. You have players who are publicly taking responsibility, directly taking responsibility, holding themselves accountable. Because that's the key, guys. The coaches can try to hold you accountable all they want. But if you don't have that player-driven team, that player-led team, which I think really believe we did have in 21 and 22 especially, maybe to a little bit of a lesser degree in 2023, not as much last year. We didn't have enough of the players that were leading us last year. That can be a problem. Absolutely can be a problem. So here you see signs of a guy like Oscar Delp saying, you know what, it's my bad. It's on me. It's on me. And the players are holding themselves accountable. Yeah, Kirby's always going to hold him accountable. That's what that man does. That's what he's all about. But again, it doesn't so much matter if the players aren't buying in and they aren't listening to this and it's not resonating with them and they aren't holding themselves accountable. That seems to be happening. So I see signs of a program. When I hear those comments, I see signs of a program of a team that is rededicating itself to that standard and that culture that allowed us to ascend to the top of the college football mountain. And after last year, guys, like as great as when the SEC title was, as great as that was, there are also a lot of games where we're not used to this. Like almost losing to Kentucky, like we hadn't seen that in a minute, right? 2021, 22, 23, we're killing teams, blowing them out. All of a sudden, not so much. And sure, NIL, transfer portal, all that levels the playing field to a degree. But after some of those uncharacteristic things we saw from this program, things that certainly were not characteristic of the teams we saw from 21 to 23, and also some of the things that we saw off the field, what we heard from Kirby Smart today, what we heard from Oscar Delp, what we heard from Monroe Frigg and some of the other players, it's very encouraging, very refreshing, at least for this Georgia fan to hear. I don't want to speak for everybody else, but for me, it's very encouraging, and I think it should be encouraging for other Georgia fans as well. I think it bodes very well for what this 2025 team is going to be. We might not win the national title, guys. I don't know. We've got a ton of questions this year, more questions, I think, on this team than we've had in a long time under Kirby Smart. I think going back to the beginning of the Kirby Smart tenure. In some ways, it's refreshing, right? To have all these battles and to figure out who is going to step up and who are going to be these guys. We know we have a ton of talent, but there are a lot of questions. So I can't guarantee that we're going to win a national title. And we're talking about just one day of press conferences, one day of interviews. So again, we don't want to read too much into it, but I do find this very encouraging that we're going to have a team this year that even if we don't win the national title, it's not going to be because we aren't bought in. It's not going to be because we have a sense of entitlement that has infected our program. I think we have established that it has. I think our players and our coaches spent some time in the offseason reflecting, and they're owning it. They're holding themselves accountable, and that's a really positive sign moving forward into the 2025 season. All right, guys, thank you so much for checking this episode out. I know we don't really talk until off the field stuff like this. We're gonna get back to the on the field hardcore Georgia football talk, which is what we love to do. It's what we're known for here on the Glory UGA podcast. We'll get back to that next week. We have more stuff to report, but I wanted to touch on this today because it kind of just jumped out at me, guys. And then after a minute, it got me excited about what we can expect this year. So I want to come on here and talk a little bit about it here on the YouTube channel. So thank you guys for being here. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, especially if you're a diehard Georgia fan, because that's what this channel is. It's made for you guys. Subscribe, like, comment, all that's greatly appreciated. And also check out the Glory UJ podcast, wherever you get your podcast. Spotify, Apple, Google, wherever, for a ton more Georgia sports content. Obviously, we talk a ton of Georgia football. And then what we get here is just a little bit of taste of that. We also talk Georgia basketball, Georgia baseball. I'm a Georgia guy. I talk Georgia everything, so make sure to check that out wherever you get your podcast. But thank you guys again. I'm Tyler, and as always, go Dogs!